listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Ever wondered if you could completely delete yourself from the internet? Well, it isn't entirely possible, but what is taking back control of the hundreds of thousands of data points that might exist about you online.
There are still so many places that my data still exists online that you could spend the rest of your life trying to delete yourself from them. And I also don't even have full confidence that the places that I did attempt to delete myself from were fully deleted.
So we speak to an everyday Aussie taking on the mammoth task and the CEO of a company you can pay to do it for you in the second half of this show. But now it is time for the headlines with Chris Spiru. Today's Monday, the 30th of September.
What you've just heard there was protesters in Sydney yesterday at one of many rallies held across Australia against Israel's violence in the Middle East. Thousands of people gathered in cities around Australia for a national day of action for Gaza, but many were also there to protest the mounting civilian death toll and casualties in Lebanon as well. Things escalated over the weekend in the Middle East, with Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah killed in an airstrike, which follows a week of strikes on southern Lebanon and Beirut, which have killed more than 1,200 people, Sash.
Meantime, Israel has this morning launched attacks on Houthi targets in Yemen, expanding the number of targets it is actively fighting. Over the weekend at the UN, Penny Wong again called for a ceasefire in both Gaza and Lebanon. And this, of course, all comes days ahead of the one-year anniversary of the October 7 attacks. That happens next Monday. So Jewish groups across the country and, of course, across the world have got remembrance activities planned. 1,200 people were killed on that day when Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel. And subsequently, the attacks on Gaza since have killed more than 40,000 Palestinians. So just so much violence, and it's spread into Lebanon. Now Houthi targets in Yemen. Israel is looking like it's fighting a war on three fronts. Now, there was renewed presence at protests over the weekend, and I think that's off the back of the strikes in Lebanon. It's gotten more people, I guess, amped up or angry or wanting to speak out or show their solidarity with the people of Lebanon. And Penny Wong at the United Nations also over the weekend urged the UN to set a deadline for the declaration of Palestinian statehood, so essentially a two-state solution. And she said that the world can't wait for that anymore.
Back home now, the federal government has delivered another budget surplus, this time to the value of $15.8 billion. It's $6.4 billion higher than the $9.3 billion predicted in the federal budget back in May, and it marks the first time in nearly 2 decades we've had back-to-back surpluses. So Treasurer Jim Chalmers credits Labor's bigger than expected surplus, that's a quote, entirely to a drop in spending. He says it's helped repay debts and fight against inflation, Sash.
So last year's surplus was a little bit higher at $22.1 billion, but either way, it represents some extra cash in the coffers, which is always nice. And the final budget outcome will be detailed by Chalmers and the Finance Minister, Katie Gallagher, today. And that will also detail our current net debt. So that's another factor that we have to take into account. It's not all sunshine and rainbows with more money. We also owe people a lot of cash as well. If you're one of the lucky people who is continuing to enjoy working from home in our post-pandemic world, your days could be numbered. A new survey of Aussie CEOs by KPMG has found 8 in 10, that's more than 80%, believe working from home will be dead within 3 years. And that's up quite a bit on the same survey last year, which found 65% of bosses thought working from home would become a thing of the past.
Yeah, sticking with the numbers here, only 27% of respondents expected hybrid roles will continue, and not one CEO expects jobs to be fully remote within that period, Sasha. So
that's sad.
The survey covered 1,325 chief executives in 11 economies, including Australia, and Australian leaders' opinions are in line with their global peers. So 78% of Australian CEOs surveyed said that they were likely to reward employees who made the effort to come into the office with incentives like raises, promotions, and better projects.
Yeah, I really hate this because I think it's really wonderful that people can work from home. We can't.
No, we can't.
We have to be in the office every day. But that's fine. That's the role that I'm in, and I totally accept that. I love that other people can work from home. And so I had a look to see how many people were actually still working from home. So according to the latest ABS data, now this is from the end of last year, so things might have changed in the last, what month are we in? September? 9 months, 10 months almost. But at that time, 37% of Aussies worked from home regularly, at least once a week. And back in 2022, a survey found 88% of Aussie workers wish they could work from home at least partially. So I do think it's one of those things that it's bosses and employees kind of at loggerheads. So at the end of the day, though, CEOs make the rules and dish out the paychecks. So we have to do what they say. And season 50 of Saturday Night Live has kicked off in the US with a cold open about what else? The US election. It was a star-studded cast, but it included none other than Maya Rudolph reprising her role as Kamala Harris.
I just want to say thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you for putting country first and for handing over the reins.
I didn't want to. They made me. And guess what? And by the way,
She's brilliant.
She sounds exactly like her.
She actually does. And what a gift SNL have in Maya Rudolph. She just nails that Kamala impression. But look, it's another big week on the campaign trail. While Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are unlikely to debate again, we'll get the two VP picks facing off. So that's JD Vance and Tim Walz. They'll debate each other on Wednesday morning, our time, which I know, Sash, me and you will be watching very closely.
Oh, yeah. Well, I learned something about Tim Walz today. Apparently, he is not a great debater, and he is the first to say that about himself. He acknowledges it. And apparently, he's really, really nervous, and he has been doing drills with his team. They've been watching JD Vance really closely. They've been doing mock debates, which I think obviously would be part of debate prep. But the fact that he is so nervous, according to so many insiders, my heart breaks for him a little bit. And whether you like his politics or not, Tim Walz is like a big teddy bear. He's just like your grandfather or your dad, depending on how old you are. And I just, when you think about your dad being in an awkward situation, you're like, oh no,
yeah,
Dad.
I don't want that for him. Yeah.
That's how I feel about Tim Walz.
100%. It's like my dad picked up refereeing this year, and I was like, why are you doing this? Stop putting yourself in this situation.
They've got it.
Heart breaks.
Oh no, I'm sure all the dads out there are doing well. Tim Walz will give it his best shot. It'll be interesting though. There's only 35 days to go, and this is looked at as the last big marquee event of the election campaign, especially if we don't see Trump and Harris debate again. So this is the last chance potentially for both sides to kind of put their policies up against each other. The pressure's on for both of them. Chris, thank you so much for being here for the headlines today. Next up, it is our deep dive, and we are looking at whether you can actually delete yourself from the internet.
Have you ever tried to delete yourself from the internet? I'm not just talking about deactivating an old MySpace or Twitter account, but actually trying to scrub your personal information from the hundreds of websites that might still hold them. Now, each time we buy something online, sign up for a free trial or book flights, we give companies our personal information. So things like our names, date of birth, email and physical address, credit card details, passwords, the name of our first pet, you name it. And that information is often collected, whether legally or illegally, by data brokers, who then sell it, and there's a lot of people buying. Data is gold from a corporate level because it gives businesses a much better picture of you and me. What car we drive, what clothes we like to wear, what food we eat, where we live, how much money we earn, what we care about, the list goes on and on. But from a privacy perspective, it's incredibly concerning, especially as we've seen more and more in recent years when these databases are compromised. Data like this can easily be used to impersonate you online or to hack into some of your most private accounts. And according to cybersecurity experts, the amount of personally identifiable information that exists per person online has more than doubled in the last 5 years. And privacy laws, while evolving, are doing so very slowly and can only do so much. So, while there are companies entering the space to help individuals know where their data lives and how to take back control of it, there's also everyday Australians undertaking the seemingly impossible task. One such person is Lindsey Green. Lindsey is a Melbourne-based podcast producer. Lindsey, welcome to The Briefing.
Thank you for having me.
You tried to delete yourself, or at least take control of your digital footprint online. Before we get into the how, why did you want to do that?
It started quite organically. I don't think I ever started with the intention of trying to delete myself from the internet, but I remember looking at my Google password manager, which saves all your passwords for every account that you've ever created, because probably I needed to find a password for something that I actually used. And I saw in my Google password manager just like reams and reams and reams of all these accounts with passwords attached to them that I completely forgot I ever created and had no need for anymore, that my profile was still attached to, which just started to freak me out a little bit. Wouldn't necessarily call myself kind of a tin hat, scared of privacy kind of person, but I did start to think like this place that I bought a pizza from 10 years ago, like, do they really need my information? So then I just kind of got a bit wigged out and thought maybe I should start looking into getting rid of my profile from places that don't need it anymore.
And how many accounts did you have?
Oh, hundreds. There's like the normal stuff that you would probably assume, like the accounts that you actually still use, like your Netflix and your other streaming services and your bank account and maybe your online super or whatever. But it's those ones that you create an account for that you completely forget about, because now you need to create an account for everything. Like I ordered a pizza once, and you create an account to order the pizza online, and then your profile just lives online forever. So imagine every single time that you ever make a transaction online, which we do probably hundreds of times a year, for ticket venues or online shopping or buying food online, every single time that you ever make a transaction online, there's an account created for them.
Which is so true and very relatable. What were some of the companies on the list?
So some of them are normal, like that you would expect and that you would probably use, like 10 Play, 7 Plus, but then it's stuff like Adelaide Metro, because once I was in Adelaide and I needed to buy a Metro card. Anytime you make an appointment, like if you make a doctor's appointment or your eyelashes tinted or any kind of appointment, every single appointment place has a different appointment booking. I remember when I was overseas last year, I was looking into this car ride service called Blah Blah Car, which I never actually ended up using, but that's still there. Any kind of ticketing places, like every single venue that you've ever bought a ticket from. Like I've seen one show at the Civic Theatre in Newcastle, and that still exists. There's stuff like Booktopia, Bras and Things, Dropbox, IKEA, JB Hi-Fi.
Lindsay's list is wild, but also not uncommon by any means. In fact, tech experts estimate the average person in 2024 has 168 passwords, which gives us a pretty good indicator of just how many accounts we might have. Okay, so how did you then go about deleting the accounts you didn't want?
Thankfully, this was the stage of my life where I didn't have a lot else to do. So I really started with the Google Password Manager, and I would just go through in alphabetical order from beginning to bottom, going to the account, like logging into the account that I had on whatever website it was, and depending on what was available on the website kind of dictated my next step. So some of them, thankfully, were really straightforward. You would log into the account with the password that I had saved, and there would be an option. There would be like a settings bar, delete my account. That was really straightforward. But what I came to realise was that a lot of them don't make it that straightforward. A lot of them don't have the option to log into an account and click settings and click delete my account, which then led me down I remember actually Googling like how to delete an account when there's no option on the online portal, and a website suggested searching their like privacy policy, because there would be somewhere in a privacy policy some email address that you could contact to say, hey, can you please delete all my information? So at the start, my first round, I did as much as I could, just like going on manually deleting my account when it had the option. But with the ones where that wasn't an option, I would search like the Louvre. I bought tickets to the Louvre, so I'd search like Louvre privacy policy, do Command F for like the email. I said I didn't have a lot going on in my life at this time. Do the command search for email address, and then email, hey there Louvre, can you please delete all of my information? Even then wasn't necessarily straightforward. If you were lucky, someone would respond and say, yep, no worries, we've deleted your account. But with some places like the Louvre or the New York Times or a couple of other places, it would send you back like an automated response, and then you would have to fill out a form or do all of these things. I started this process in maybe October of 2023, and I think even the start of 2024, I was still getting emails back saying, yes, confirming that we've deleted your account.
Oh, it's a bit of a laborious task there, Linz. What did you take away from the process?
I was very shocked that there wasn't an easy way to delete yourself.
And you say you've gone through all the accounts you no longer want and you avoid signing up for new things that you don't need. All in all, are you happy that you did it?
I think it was a bit of a waste of time in hindsight, because towards the end, I just gave up, and there are still so many places that my data still exists online that you could spend the rest of your life trying to delete yourself from them. And I also don't even have full confidence that the places that I did attempt to delete myself from were fully deleted. There was this one that I did a bit of email back and forth with and said, hey, can you please delete my account? And they wrote back and said something to the effect of, like, we can delete your name and phone number, but we can't delete your account entirely. So there's not, at least from my perspective, there wasn't a foolproof way of deleting everything entirely. So I don't think that I would bother.
Lindsey tried to do this on her own, but she's not the only one who's had the idea. There are now companies popping up to provide this service for a fee. You pay a subscription, and the business routinely scrapes the internet for your personal data across hundreds of databases, and then they give you the opportunity to delete or keep it. One of those services is US-based privacy company Delete Me. Their CEO is Rob Shavel. Rob, to start us off, we know that the bulk of your business is based around identifying data that data brokers might be sharing with companies. What information about us is being transacted that people typically want removed?
First and foremost, we look at what's highly exposed. So when you do a variety of Google searches, I don't know if you knew this, but 11% of all internet searches are for people. So you can imagine there are literally billions and billions of searches every hour that are people searching for other people's information. So the reason why all these data brokers and databases exist out there is because humans are constantly looking up information on other humans. So the information that they're finding is often sold, listed highly on Google and sold in these profiles. And they might just be looking for a phone number or address. But when they buy a profile from a data broker, and these profiles can be purchased for as little as $1, what they find is a whole lot more detailed information. They can find not just addresses and phone numbers, but spouses' names, dates of birth, ages, children's names, vehicle data. And the reason why there's more and more detailed information there is because these data brokers that scrape and aggregate and correlate all this information about all of us who use the internet have gotten better at doing what they do.
How then does Delete Me clear all this information? What does that process look like?
You sign up, at joindeleteme.com, and you tell us, hey, here's the information about me, and we let you add all kinds of different things, past email addresses and mobile phones and past addresses and corporate information and what have you, and family information that might be linked to you. And we'll go out and start a process of constructing queries to try to find where that information is exposed, both at a very simplistic level, just by querying Google, and then down into sort of what we call deep web searches that go into specific databases and look for things almost as if you were a detective. Once we get all those results, and this is done through a combination of technology and people, then when privacy laws change or when somebody has information found at a particular place, like an old social media account or something that they no longer have access to, we can take appropriate actions. And it's not just a static automated system, because that doesn't really work well when you've got something as nuanced and as ever changing as privacy and personal information on the web. We take all those results, we actually go out and do the work. And that means we go out to each one of these databases and we go try to do the work at each one to redact that information, get it deleted or get it taken down in whatever ways we can. And those ways are always changing because some of those sites, surprise, surprise, don't want you to remove your information because they make money on it. Can you do this yourself? Absolutely. Do we encourage you to do it yourself? We do. We actually publish, if you go to Join Delete Me, we publish a DIY guides for every single site that we cover. We update them. We take you through step by step what you'd need to do if you want to affect this action yourself, and you can do it for free. You don't have to pay us.
What do you do with information that comes up that may be a little embarrassing or even, let's say, help police with investigations?
It's a very gray area. Certainly, we wouldn't get in the way of a court-ordered proceeding to keep data. Nor could we legally do that. If there's embarrassing information, which I'm sure there's lots of embarrassing stuff out there about me, and even though I have this company, to the extent that the laws in any particular jurisdiction allow you to have rights over that, we will work with you to do it, of course, and as it should be. So it's nuanced, and like banking information, is highly protected by many governments, including in the U.S., where all financial transactions are legally protected for many years because governments are worried that there's going to be fraud and they're not going to be able to track down the root cause of that fraud. And I think that's true across many countries. But I think, going back to what can you remove and what can we help you with, the core of it is data brokers, and then everything else, we're adding to the service constantly. And I guess I was going to finally end with the good news. And I think the good news is there are lots more laws in place all over the world now that give you rights that you didn't have a few years ago.
I can speak for Australia. Our consumer watchdog, the ACCC, has been tasked with and is actually almost complete a 5-year inquiry looking into the safety and security of our digital platform services and looking specifically into how our data is being traded by data brokers. Now, under Australian law, companies must delete or de-identify consumer data once it's no longer needed. That's clearly being circumvented and isn't enough. What instead would you like governments to do in this space?
I'd like governments to understand that there needs to be a partnership between the laws that they're passing and services like Delete Me. It doesn't have to be us, it could be a bunch of other people. Privacy services that help people enforce their rights. Now that they've gotten their rights, that's great. But they need help enforcing them, because we've got to have a partnership between the governments and the legislation and a marketplace that makes it easy to enforce it.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having me.
Podcast producer Lindsey Green and CEO of Delete Me, Rob Shavel there. Have you ever tried to delete yourself from the internet? We would love to hear your thoughts on it. Hop into our DMs or comment section on Instagram, just search @The Briefing Podcast, or head to our TikTok or YouTube, just search Listener Newsroom. That's all we have time for today. We would love it if you could share this app with someone who you think might enjoy it. And don't forget, we'll be back in your feed today from 3 p.m. I'm Chris Biru. Catch you next time.
Listener.